Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Chris. Welcome
back.
to the second episode of Brent and Chris Talk.
It is happening.
How was your week?
It was good. It was really good. Nice short week at work. I'm taking tomorrow off, going up to Chicago to spend some time with family and friends and have a good time. And
Nice.
yeah,
Well,
so I've been looking forward to that all week, but I just kind of sailed through it, you know?
3-day vacations are always a nice break
Oh,
in
yeah.
life.
Family's important too. You got to take time out and just kind of leave your phone away and just do the family thing and enjoy your kids and your wife and have fun with it.
I have a sick kid right now.
See, that's not fun. You don't enjoy that at all.
No,
Jeez.
started with a fever Monday, and fever just kept getting worse, even with the ibuprofen. So we took him to the doctor for a second time. First time there was nothing. Second time, full-on earache. So doing the whole amoxicillin.
And any of you parents out there have heard that before, right? Amoxicillin and all these other antibiotics that they just pump into your kids when they get these problems. It's crazy.
It's fun.
Ah, geez. So your week was good then, or not good?
You know.
You tell me.
Minus the sick kid, it was good. He's on the mend. It's crazy how fast,
kids,
once
man.
you get the antibiotics in
They
them.
bounce back. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Like they bounce off things,
He just
literally.
looks
And
so,
they're like,
his eyes look so sick. You just feel so bad.
when you see him like that too, you're just like, just bums you out.
We did a couple improvements from last week. I don't have a crinkly water bottle. I know I'm drinking out of a recyclable water,
Reusable.
reusable, potable source. Let's see, and you've
Me too.
upgraded.
Yep. Got the Stanley here. Made in China.
It all is.
Yeah, that's
Minus
exactly right.
We'll do that when we make a fact. No, we won't. Let's see. Anything else before we're diving into our topic this week?
Yep, that's right. Got to go into gun regulation. There's just so much going on in the news. It's a topic that I was telling you I've been thinking about a lot for years. And I'll get into this more later. But as a gun owner and someone though that is also appalled by what we keep seeing happening, it's just so much that needs to be addressed. And I think that just through our conversations before, we have a lot to offer. And in terms of really the I guess wide array of thoughts, opinions, but also there's lots of statistics behind all this that we need to dive into and understand more about. That way we can make an informed decision, like we talked about in the first episode. There's no reason to just sit there and take someone else's word for it. Figure it out for yourself and make a decision.
And it feels like every time there's a mass shooting, I dive into the research. And so I have a compilation here of some of my favorite, I hate to use the word favorite, but my go-to statistics that have really helped me inform my decision and my stance on guns in this country.
You have like a serious notepad there too.
I do. It made me feel like I was back on the art cart. I used to host a radio show that was all about art history.
Yeah.
And very much the same research ethic went into this.
A neat little show.
I must say my criteria for sources has gone way up.
Oh yeah.
Before I was like, Wikipedia, he's a dead composer.
Good enough.
Yeah.
We all were there in college. I understand.
Yeah, volunteer radio program in college. It was good.
Heck yeah.
So, let's see. One of the videos I saw this time around after the shootings in El Paso and Dayton was this video from when Obama was up for re-election and he was doing a town hall meeting. And this Republican, nice gentleman gets up and he says, why are you trying to restrict the gun manufacturers and restrict good gun owners? Why? And then he says, let me use your hometown as an example, Chicago, Illinois.
Yep, makes sense.
And he says it's been run by Democrats for years. They have some of the most, the highest gun rate, or highest homicide rates from guns. And, he said, why are you stopping the good people from getting guns who want to stop these people? And Obama gave this great analogy about how we used to have bad car fatalities.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people were dying, and the CDC...
More than today,
yeah. And the rates have declined because the CDC studied all the information that went into why we were having all these fatalities. And we cracked down on drunk driving. We cracked down on texting and driving, talking on your phone.
Better airbags and better safety harnesses.
Seatbelts.
Yep.
Requiring seatbelts. We even changed the slants of roads and embankments so they were safer. Cars wouldn't go off them and such.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So there's this problem, though, with the CDC in that they, due to something called the Dickey Amendment, which was introduced in the omnibus bill, which was our spending bill in '96, so Clinton.
Yep, exactly right.
The Dickey Amendment says none of the funds made available for injury prevention and control at the CDC may be used to advocate or promote gun control. And this is taken from an article that was calling out the CDC's lack of the word firearms.
Okay.
And there's these internal memos that were released that basically was between two people talking about how they have the evidence that guns are one of the most often used things in suicides.
Okay.
And they wanted to say that, if you prevented people from having firearms that were, mentally unstable or having, hardships in their life.
Crisis, whatever.
That, that keeping them away from firearms would be a good thing to do. But they got shot down by someone else in the CDC saying, if we use those words, it'll come off like we're advocating or promoting gun control and we'll get in trouble.
So this Dickey Amendment said that you were not allowed to say exactly what?
The words they use specifically are advocate or promote gun control. And what I take that as is anything that's going to say taking someone away from guns or anything along those lines, even if it's factual, they cannot bring to the table because, in essence, factual or not, it is, in essence, promoting or advocating for gun control.
Yeah, and I think, there's something to be said for the fact that some people, and I don't necessarily disagree, would say, well, why should any government entity just be out there advocating for one stance or another, right? They should be offering just objective facts, and I think there's nothing wrong with that.
And they're not being allowed to do that, or either the head of the CDC or,
their interpretation.
Their interpretation is really holding them back. It's
amazing.
It is. Now, the CDC's main goal is to protect the public health and safety through control and prevention of disease, injury, disability in the United States and internationally. So, prevention of disease, injury, and disability. But they're not allowed to talk about guns.
See, you think that, honestly, my interpretation, if I was the head of the CDC, would be that, yeah, I can't just take a stance and say, we have to have just strict gun control, nothing but the most, restrictive gun laws, or the opposite, right? You could choose to go one way or the other, somewhere in between. But at the end of the day, there's nothing to me that's advocating one way or the other about publishing the facts and summarizing those in a way that does nothing but interprets those facts. Like, right, you can make sure that it's an objective interpretation of the data. That way, you're not advocating for gun control or the opposite.
It's what we need. And Obama's point was because of the Dickey Amendment, they're not allowed to get the same information that they compiled with the cars. So literally...
So it's not the same approach, like they can't report it the same way or study it the same way.
Right, and while Obama was in office, there were more guns sold in the country than any other time.
Sure.
And one of the things Obama was frustrated with is because of some of the things holding him back, he couldn't even prevent somebody on the no-fly list from getting a gun.
Right.
He could prevent them from boarding a plane, but he wasn't allowed to prevent them.
I think I've heard that before where there was that loophole. And honestly, like I said before, as a person who has gone through the, transaction and the steps to purchase a firearm, I own several of them. I'm a proud gun owner. I think it is a right that we should have, but within certain reason. Mainly from the fact that even with what I have to do in the state of Illinois to own a firearm, it's not that difficult. We were talking about this the other day.
Yeah.
You have to have a FOID card, which it is basically a permit to own firearms, purchase and own them. If you don't have that, I believe you're not allowed to actually possess firearms. Like if mine was to expire, I believe I have to sell them or transfer them to somebody else to actually possess. But when it comes to buying, I can literally go to a website right now. I could go to one of several, and I could order with my credit card pretty much an unlimited number. I mean, I've never actually encountered...
Act now, and they'll throw in the holster.
You know what's funny is that does happen. They offer
know.
ammunition, they offer extra magazines,
Yeah.
they offer like a package deal. They want to sell you as much product as possible, like any good business. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, incentivizing the sale, in my opinion. Now,
It's capitalism, and it absolutely has a place.
yeah. So I place my order. Say I want to go out there and I find myself a nice, competition grade Colt 45. You know, that's maybe $1,000 or so. I could order that right now, and it would ship probably the next day or so, and then I'd have it within a week to my local FFL or firearms licensed dealer that could transfer that weapon to me for a small fee, $20. So I mean, or you could go the cheap route. I could buy maybe a couple $100 gun, right? That will shoot. It'll make the bullet go out of the gun the same way as that $1,000 gun.
Yeah.
And I get the same process. Have it in a week. Fill out a little bit of paperwork, and it's mine. And it's so easy to own firearms. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with owning them. I think though there should be a little more scrutiny done with the process of actually transacting the purchase and transfer that firearm. I mean, especially with some of the loopholes we talked about in our conversation on the phone. I mean, this has been going on for a while, folks, too. You can go to a gun show, and it's not the same. You can actually purchase the gun then and there. You don't have to go through any kind of waiting period. There's private gun sales. There's other things I'm not talking about here. But the fact is, there's a lot of what I call loopholes. Or easy ways to skirt what I would call the normal process.
So, no, actually, I mean, I have some information. So, do you know your Second Amendment?
My Second Amendment rights?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know that the basics of it are that I have the right to bear arms. Now, can you give me some more detail on that?
Yes, verbatim here. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Yep. And see, that's something else we talked about, too. The fact that when this was written, the United States had already declared independence, right? We were forming a new government, and we were in a state of, even through decades later, right? We brought up militias from the states to fight wars for us. So it wasn't uncommon to bring your own weapon from your home and join the state militia and fight.
And Trevor Noah made a really funny point. Like, the guns sucked.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they weren't good guns.
Flintlock. In those days, man, we're talking about muskets.
Yeah.
And like, you're literally keeping the powder dry, and you have to go through I think it's over a minute to actually load and fire that thing.
Yeah. So you got a wad.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Pack
the ball, gunpowder, everything down there. You got to, like, have a horn or something to house that gunpowder. And, I mean, it's a ramrod operation.
I don't think the Founding Fathers had semi-automatic rifles, handguns of today in
Semi-auto,
mind.
full auto, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, they didn't have what the military uses on a regular basis available to, or they didn't probably envision it to be available to the general populace in a relatively safe, I'd say probably very safe, free economy that has not had the entire continent engaged in actual battle.
Yeah. That's
for
why
a
Trevor,
long time. I mean,
that's why Trevor Noah joked. That's why the British were willing to stand in a straight line, and just get shot. Like, we have tea
that's
time.
The last time that I think there was battle fought, I mean, the Civil War for sure, but on the American continent, I think there was some skirmishes along the Mexican-American border when the U.S. was going after a Pancho V or something like that. Mexican bandits, they called them. Whatever the case may be. We haven't fought a war on this continent for a while.
Yeah.
And the point of that in the Second Amendment was to prepare. And there's some facts to this too, right? During World War II, I know that there was people who, after the war, they found out that the Japanese and the Germans were trying to figure out, well, so we conquer Asia, we conquer Europe, we want to get the Americans, like we've somehow defeated the Allies, right? So what are we going to do to get America? Well, every American's got a freaking gun. So it's going to be an absolute nightmare to try to invade and conquer the American homeland.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for that. Like, I get the point and what they were after there. I just feel like we should have a right to bear arms. We should have a right to own those weapons. But there's nothing wrong with regulations to ensure that the owners are,
Yes. And
validated.
We've had some regulations. There was the Gun Control Act of 1968. This prohibited the sale of firearms to anyone under 18, convicted criminals, the mentally disabled, dishonorably soldiers who were dishonorably discharged, and there was a few others. Fast forward to 1993.
Yeah.
There was the Brady Handgun Act, and it mandated background checks for all unlicensed individuals from a federally authorized dealer.
Yeah, sure.
So,
yep. That's what I'm talking about when I go through.
Yeah. Now, skip again, to 2008.
So more than a decade later.
The U.S. Supreme Court strikes down
15 years.
a Washington, D.C. law that was trying to ban handguns. And I'm going to get into some gun facts and why that may be the most common place to start, or most logical.
Sure.
So from 94, which was a year after the Brady Handgun Act, to 2004, there was a federal prohibition on assault weapons and large capacity magazines.
So you couldn't buy them at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was a drop, but we allowed that to expire. There's a drop in homicides from assault weapons.
Okay.
After the Newtown, Florida, the school.
Yep.
That was.
All of these are terrible.
They are.
This is such a horrific topic to get into details about. You talk about the numbers. I mean, you get 20 plus people.
Oh, we'll get into the numbers.
Yeah,
it's going to be.
In a lot of these, it's just horrific.
So after the Newtown, Florida attack, Florida actually was able to pass some gun regulation, which I'm sorry, Florida, but I'm surprised, and good for you.
Yeah,
all
for sure.
At the same time.
All those articles that we all hear.
Florida man.
Yeah, I mean, Florida man does what? It's like on your birthday. That was the whole gimmick earlier this year. I didn't do it, actually. Some people I know were, but it's like, come on.
Well,
give Florida a break.
We will. Florida raised the age to 21 to buy guns, and they banned bump stocks.
Okay.
Something we've still not been able to do.
If you can drink alcohol, then you can own a weapon.
Yeah. Now, the U.S. has less than 5% of the world's population.
Yep.
But 46% of the world's civilian-owned guns.
Yeah. No shocker there. We love our guns. I love my guns.
Yeah. Now, this is all from a website, and I'll share links to all these. This is from a website called www.cfr.org, and it's the Control on Foreign Relations, U.S. Gun Policy, and Global Comparisons.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a mouthful. Jeez, they better know what they're talking about.
So let's see. In Canada is often driven by gun violence, unlike America.
Okay.
In '89, there was a student armed with a semi-automatic rifle who killed 14 students and injured a dozen more. And this is credited for such reforms as a 28-day waiting period.
Oh, to actually take possession after you buy?
Yep. Mandatory safety training.
Okay. Europeans do that, I believe, too.
There was a large capacity magazine ban and a ban on military weapons.
Interesting. So like the AR assault rifle style weapons, that AR-15s and whatever else that we hear about. So that's interesting. Mandatory safety training. Like I believe
I'm totally for that.
European countries, yeah, I am too.
Yeah.
I believe European countries make you do that. Now, to get a FOID card, to actually buy a gun, you don't have to have any training.
Right.
You can buy it and just have it. You can load it and shoot it and be an idiot and not have any idea what you're doing. And I mean it in the nicest way. You should never just go and buy one and figure it out for yourself. Like, you need some expertise to properly handle and clean. And it's not just the handling, maintaining the thing. Because if you let it get dirty or you let it break and not function properly, you're risking your life and those around you, for
To
sure.
quote Stan Lee, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. They are tools to be utilized in the proper fashion, whether for sport, fun, or for your job, like if you're a military or a police officer. But that's interesting, that mandatory safety training. So we don't have to have any, and these guys in Canada,
our neighbors to the
have
north.
it.
Now, 1995, Canada forms a gun registry.
Okay.
Also something, like, that's common sense. I'm sorry.
So like a national database?
But in 2012, it overturns.
Really?
Yep.
So a new government came in,
Yep.
flipped it?
Guess what? There was a shooting in 2017, and it's back.
Interesting. Wow. It's amazing how things, you hate to say you're right when you're certain people, but it's just like, my gosh, that just doesn't, that speaks for itself.
There's a bunch listed on the website that I listed, and I'll, again, put a link on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you're watching. If you're on SoundCloud, I don't know what to do, I'm sorry. I will...
We're going to figure that out.
We've
been talking about that.
So, I do want to talk about one other place, and that's Australia's gun laws.
Yep.
There was the Port Arthur massacre in '96,
Yep.
where 35 people were killed and over 24 people were wounded. And less than 2 weeks after this, the conservative-led government passed comprehensive gun reform for the country.
Wow.
They prohibited automatic and semi-automatic rifles. They mandated license and registration.
Mm-hmm.
They offered a temporary gun buyback program. Excuse me.
Okay.
They bought 650,000 rifles back, 1/6 of the nation's stock.
That's amazing that they went to sell them back too. I'm kind of shocked that people were willing to hand over their guns like that. But again, I'm an American, right? I have our perspective, not theirs.
You had to have a gun safety course. Another
New
place.
New Zealand, after all that stuff went down, they did something similar, passed a lot of laws, and I believe that they had people turn in their firearms because they view it more of the same way as the Australians do. Apparently, New Zealand's not very far from Australia, so.
So, yeah, I actually have the data on that too, because
Wow.
that is a hiccup.
That's amazing.
Demonstrate. The other thing you have to do to get a gun in Australia is demonstrate a general need.
A need?
Yeah.
Wow.
So in
Can you need to have fun?
yeah. In 2002,
That's mine.
there was a high-profile shooting. In Australia, in 2002, there was a high-profile shooting, and this one led to gun reform. And there were decreased gun deaths since '96 after they did all the changes.
The first one?
Yeah. Now, John Oliver does this great interview, and he was still on The Daily Show when this happens, but he actually goes to Australia and interviews these politicians because they were conservative.
Yeah.
They all got voted out.
Really?
All of them, pretty much. And John Oliver is kind of teasing, like, why would you
sacrifice yourselves like that? Yeah.
And they all said, "Are you kidding me? It's the right thing to do."
Yeah.
Like.
Isn't that refreshing?
And then they interview an aide of a U.S. politician, and they say, "Well, what's the job of a U.S. politician? What's the first job?" And he says, "To get reelected." Without thinking, he just blurts that out.
Yeah.
Like, we have a hole
broken
in
system
our
with that
democracy there.
That's interesting. Because most of the founding fathers and the initial politicians, like, there were families that were political dynasties, so to speak, but for the most part, those guys got in, they did their duty, and they got out. Like, they didn't see it as, got to get reelected.
Yeah.
They saw it as representing their principles, their values, and that's why we founded this nation, and to develop a more perfect union, right? It's always in perpetual change because it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. You have to keep working toward that vision.
Yeah. 2019, New Zealand. There was a massacre in a mosque where it was 51 people who died.
Just absolutely slaughtered.
And
Jesus.
it was an Australian who had bought the weapons.
Legally right?
purchased.
Jeez.
Do you want to do some gun stats about the United States?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking about these other countries, but it's kind of staggering how many shootings we've had and the escalation. And think about when we were in high school, right?
Yeah.
We never heard about this kind of stuff that often. Columbine happened. I'm not exactly sure when that happened, but that happened when we were a lot younger. Quite a while ago. And but there was never any major security at school. I remember going to co-op, right? Going to work for a half day of school and then going to work during my senior year, and I believe there's probably a buzzer to get in, but we just knew which door to open and go in. There was nothing stopping us. It's just incredible.
I remember when we were in high school, we all knew which door you could just pop open.
Pull open, yeah, for sure. Get in.
Anytime.
My gosh. And then now today, let's talk about some of these gun stats.
Okay, so the first numbers I have are from that NPR article I was doing earlier on the CDC's reluctance to use the F word and how it's hindering.
Yes, I read part of that. Okay, I know what you're talking about now.
So, in 2017, there were 40,000 people who died from guns.
Yep.
60% of them, though, were suicides.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, see, I had no idea there were that many suicides.
Guns are the most common method for suicides.
You could think about it.
And
why people would choose that route. It's just
they succeed.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Yeah, wow.
And suicide rates are on the rise.
I know that's a problem too.
In America too, this is kind of a side note. 90% of Americans support background checks.
Yeah, I've heard that statistic myself. I support background checks. I think there should be absolutely comprehensive background checks. And you say to yourself, what does that mean? That means that, like you were talking about earlier, you're not a convicted felon.
Right.
That you're not someone who has been classified as mentally disabled or unstable.
The one issue I have with that is, what's the upkeep? Like people aren't mentally unstable forever.
Correct. I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of problems with it too. There's these things called red flag laws people keep bringing up, and I think that's where the red flags, whatever you define them as, that those trigger, and then the police then have the ability to take your.
I have some stats
weapons.
on the mental illness and basically Republican talking points.
We should get in, and we should get into that. I think. Real quick, the interesting thing about the whole mental illness thing, though, too, is like you say that it's if you are not, in my opinion, able to say that you're able to actively make your decisions for yourself, like that's a mental incapacity. That's to me mentally unable to own the weapon because you can't make sound decisions for yourself. Like you say, this whole mental illness that can be time bound because you have a crisis or whatever. Right? How do you define when you then cross that threshold where you're back to okay, now I'm good enough to own a weapon again? And how could you say to
you
someone
assume
you never?
Friends and family? You assume friends and family are.
But is it their responsibility to police you? Look at that person who shut up that Waffle House. I think it was somebody here in Illinois.
That's right.
And like the father had the guns and gave it back to him, even though the police said that he was not capable of owning it or something. I can't remember exactly what happened. Don't quote me on any of this. But the fact of the matter is, the guy got the guns back, freaked out, went to a Waffle House, and shot it up. It's crazy.
BBC had this great article. Again, I think I shared it to our page, but it was American gun culture in charts.
Oh.
So nice big pictures for everybody.
Yeah, right.
There was an international comparison of the percentage of homicides where guns were used for the homicide. In England, and this was for all of 2017 and 18. For England and Wales, gun homicides were 3%. In 2018, for all of Canada, 38%. In Australia, for 2013-2014, 13%. In the United States, for all of 2017, 73%.
Shocker.
73%.
Yeah.
And this is...
The numbers don't lie. I mean, at the end of the day, we talked about you should be able to own a firearm. That's a basic right that we have, okay? If you're qualified to own that through whatever we decide to.
And we do.
Yeah.
We beyond own them. We, of the top 5 civilian gun-owning countries, firearms per 100 residents.
Yep.
Okay? Canada has 34.7.
Yep.
Montenegro has 39.1.
Yep.
Serbia 39.1. Yemen 52.8. That's the second highest. And then we get to the United States, 120.5 guns per every 100 residents.
Yep. And so that's residents having more than one weapon, which I am a part of. Absolutely.
And yeah, and again,
we have a lot of them.
Not criticizing. Not yet.
No.
Okay.
No. That's just it. Within reason, like I don't have you see what these people who get busted in firearms raids, they have over 1,000 guns.
Yeah,
and
right.
That is, why do you have 1,000 guns? You at some point you're gonna forget which ones you even have, unless you're super rich and have a catalog in some kind of museum.
Yeah,
it's just kind of ridiculous. There's only so many functions you can have. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like why?
And people like to point out, well, I mean, gun homicides per 100,000 people. This is for 2016. Jumping around on the years, I'm sorry, but. For every 100,000 people, gun homicides in the United States, there were 4 per every 100,000.
Yep.
The next closest one was Israel with 1. Canada, Australia, UK all have less than 1 death, gun homicide per 100,000 people.
You can't go a day without reading an article about somebody shooting at somebody. Like today, I read about, I don't know where it was at, but some people that were in a road rage incident who just started shooting at each other.
Yeah.
And it's like,
and
that kind of crap should not be stood for. Like, you should not. That should not be your first thought. Is I'm going to settle this with a gun. Like, come on. If you want to shout at people and scream at them, flip them off, whatever else, like. Verbal abuse is one thing, and it's bad enough, like having the road rage thing to like contend with. But to sit there and say that you should be fearing the fact that someone could pull
Your
out a gun
life
and start
should
shooting
end
at you
because of a driving
Yeah,
incident.
I accidentally cut you off, or you didn't like the fact I didn't use my blinkers soon
and
enough.
you think my kids don't deserve a dad
Yeah.
for that? That's
Isn't that sick?
illogical.
Yeah.
And it's Switzerland and Finland are two countries that Republicans love to.
Oh yeah, quote because they're gun toters. Yep,
Yes.
absolutely.
They are the two European countries with the most
Yep.
guns.
But what do they also make people do?
They require military service for
man.
every male over
Yeah.
18.
So you think about that, and a lot of the women in those countries, they join the military service too.
Exactly.
They do it. And
Yemen does the same thing.
And you think to yourself, that's what I was talking about earlier with having a sense of responsibility, not only with what you own like, or possessing, like how to use it, how to keep it clean, use it properly, but then what it can do. Like, say you go on a tour somewhere, because I don't know if any of those countries are part of the policing actions around the world, but say you go on a tour of duty somewhere and you have to shoot somebody because something's happening. Like, you have to make the choice to, because one of the things you learn when you go through a firearm safety class is that don't point the weapon at someone unless you're prepared, or anything, unless you're prepared to destroy it.
Yep.
Like, destroy means kill
Yep.
or blow up, whatever it may be. So if you're going to shoot at someone, you made the decision you're going to kill them. Like, you don't shoot at someone to try to maim them.
In 20, this is where I want to start. I want to start changing like the topics from what the news is talking about, because we do talk about mass shootings all the time.
Yep.
And Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh yeah, he screwed up because people took him out of. He put it in a context that was easy to misinterpret when he was trying to. His point was trying to be made.
And I don't know if it's a good point or not. Like,
No.
yes, we do things, rash things.
Make decisions based on like their
feelings.
how big of a deal they are based on just the impact of the event. Now, I will say, I don't know exactly what he said, but it's something about like, I don't remember, insects or flus kill us more often.
Yeah.
Something kills more often or is more deadly than these mass shootings. Okay, but guess what, Neil? The impact's a little different.
Yeah, right. And I mean, there is some truth about the numbers paint a very different picture about what the gun problems are in this country.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going with the numbers from 2016, there's 38,658 gun deaths, so rounded up 40,000.
Yep.
Now, of those, 14,400, so about 14,500 were murders.
Okay.
Okay? Of those, only 71 were in a mass shooting.
It's crazy.
And that leaves over 20,000 unaccounted for.
But
Those were suicides.
and see,
22,000 to 14,000.
think about this too. The homicides there was intent. Like, isn't that what prosecutors try to prove? There's intent to kill,
Yeah.
right? And so you think about that. Those people were actively trying to kill somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then suicides, as extremely unfortunate as that is, like these numbers are kind of like giving me pause. It's just insane to think about. Again, there was intent. They intended to end their life for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And 71 from mass shootings, the intent was for the mass shooter to kill. Everybody else was just going about their lives. Like, this is the land, and I think the whole world should be this way, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yep.
The pursuit of happiness does not involve preparing yourself for an active shooter
At Walmart.
incident. Yeah, at Walmart. Or, for my case, one of my employer, I went through one at work because I work for a large employer. There's a good chance that it could happen for whatever reason. There's all kinds of violence that happens in healthcare facilities.
Chelsea just had to lead an active shooter drill.
So I mean, it's kind of scary that you have to be prepared, and I'm sort of ashamed and appalled that we're going to have to teach our kids to be thinking about this stuff.
Or we might have to buy them bulletproof backpacks.
Yeah, did you ever think about that when you were a kid? Like, when you were in school, did you ever think about getting shot up at school, or anywhere you were at, for that matter?
My biggest fear was tornadoes.
Correct. Things that nature, even then, you try to be prepared.
Yeah.
Right? I never ever, thought that I had to be at this point, and as a gun owner, it pains me so much to just, I don't own an AR of any kind. I don't own an assault rifle of any kind. I don't need one. We were talking about the fact that I have my weapons for home, for self defense, and for sport. I like to shoot for fun, but you don't need a rifle, an assault rifle to shoot long distance. A shotgun with the right ammunition will shoot a good distance. And for the, just to be honest, anybody shooting for real distance that needs a scope, like that's sports shooting. These people doing these mass shootings aren't doing that. They're just getting maximum capacity with the most deadly force, which is those military grade rounds, the 223, 5.56, and 8 rounds that are designed to hit you and then just explode out of your body, like destroy tissue. And so you don't need that. Like, civilians don't need that for enjoyment. Like, you can have just as much fun. You can buy hunting rifles with a magazine if you want to have multiple rounds, and you can fire those off and have a good time.
Right.
There's limits because of what's happening to this stuff. We don't have to go as far as we have.
In 2016, the American Journal of Public Health found a strong relationship between higher gun ownership in a state and higher firearm suicide rates. Like, the numbers, Republican talking points about more guns, the numbers just don't add up. We have more guns per capita than any other country. We have higher gun violence than any other country, when in fact we should be safer than any other country.
Well, if guns are used properly and by the right people, then yeah, we would be safer because it'd be like a deterrent.
How are you going to stop people from using it on themselves?
And
22,000, almost 23,000 are suicides.
And that's just it. You can't on that side of it. And that's where I think, honestly, in people's mental states, like we were talking earlier, how do you define how long you're stable mentally and then something happens and all of a sudden you're not? Like, I get why that's the leading cause of, or one of the leading causes of death by firearm. If something happens to you and you freak out and you want to kill yourself and you're thinking about the easiest way to do it, man, I've got a gun downstairs. I know that'll kill things. And that just makes sense, as sad as it is.
The numbers, man. If you own a gun, you are sadly more likely to use it on yourself than anybody else.
Yeah.
Like, that sucks.
Yeah. It's terrible.
And this is the other thing where I think the left goes wrong. Like, I love, I guess, do anything is the mentality.
Yeah, yeah.
But in the U.S., 64% of gun murders are done with handguns.
Yeah.
64%.
Yeah. Not even the ones we're trying to ban.
No,
or even
4%. 4% are rifles, 2% are shotguns, 2% are other. What's the other? Tommy guns?
Yeah, probably homemade.
Is that still happening?
Well, we were joking about the CDC earlier. Like, if they can't call them firearms, they're going to call them, 2B medley shooty things or whatever. It's like, maybe that's what those 2% are.
Yeah, and 28% are unknown.
Wow.
Like,
it's a slingshot.
I know, with a bullet. There's a strange, I thought this was a strange comparison. An AR-15 cost about $1,500, and they compared it to a MacBook Pro.
Yeah, so here's the deal. That's probably a middle grade AR-15. You can go right now and get a Smith & Wesson MP Sport that I'm not advertising for or trying to push anything out there. I'm just giving an example. A cheap $500, maybe $550 you can own an AR-15.
That's so cheap. You can get a handgun for $200?
Correct, you can.
That's
no problem.
Insane.
A decent one for maybe $250 in terms of reliability. It's amazing.
So there's a few things that the right and the left agree on, and sadly it's the dumbest.
The wrong shit.
Yes,
yep,
and that
exactly.
There is bipartisan approval from preventing mentally ill from purchasing guns.
Yep.
80%. Okay, yep. And I'll get to the numbers, but it doesn't make sense.
We're back to the president's argument about mental illness causing all these problems, not racism and
right, vitriol.
Yeah.
There's an 80% approval rating for Republicans and Democrats for barring people on the no-fly list from getting a weapon.
Owning a firearm.
Yeah. That's not a thing. We agree, 80%, we can't get that done.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing to me. I mean, I think that you talk about people always saying on the news, common sense gun laws. Man, if you can't fly in a plane, should you own a firearm? Sure, why not?
Right, it's a constitutional right.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Go out, blaze of glory.
Wow.
So now, when it gets to allowing conceal and carry in more public places, Democrats are at a 30%. Republicans are at an 80%.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, Republicans are riding a dead horse on this thing. And who was it? McCarthy, the head of the minority, leader of the minority party.
Okay.
Kevin McCarthy, something like that. He's the one that got on the news this whole round of shootings saying it's violent video games.
Oh, yeah.
That is crazy. Like, the data from Entertainment Software Association shows that 65% of Americans play video games.
Yep. I played GTA. I killed a ton of virtual people and things and blew all
It's
kinds of
never
shit up.
led you to...
No, Black
Shocking.
Ops, I played that. We played that together, didn't we?
play GTA together.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun, man. Video games were a lot of fun when we
I
had
play
time.
GTA now, and I still get cravings for those Schwan sausage pizzas. I used to go to his house every day
Oh my
after
God.
school. We'd take turns.
It's funny, Courtney jokes with me about those because I remember I would take two of them out of the freezer and like warm them up on top of plates and like just
Yeah.
take in my room and just keep on playing. Like, holy crap, those were the days. Like, no obligations, no cares in the world. Talk about bliss. Ignorance is bliss. Jeez.
I did. I found another.
But no, I never thought about killing
Never,
people
yes.
because of my video game.
Well, and so here's the problem with using video games. There's a beautiful study done by Forbes, a guy named Kevin Anderton. He was the writer for Forbes on this article, and he studied the hours spent playing video games per week per country. Now, Germany beats us at almost 8 hours, 7.98. We do come in second
Wow.
at 7.61. Singapore's at 7.4, France is at 6.97, India's at 6.92, Japan at 6.88, Italy at 6.78. The point I'm getting at is there is not an equivalent mass shooting rate or gun violence rate in any of these countries,
Yeah.
and yet they
Even
play
close.
relatively the same amount of video games. So let's go ahead and just cross video games off the list.
You can't use that as a scapegoat at all,
Off the list.
Nice. Your little fact, Bell.
Yes! And
Feel free to comment and say you don't like that.
yeah, I know. I'm sure there's plenty. Okay, now let's get into the mentally ill.
Yep.
Okay, this was from a great video that Now This News did. Not my favorite news organization, but I really did like this. And it says there is zero data to show mentally ill have a propensity towards violence. In fact, the data shows the opposite. That mentally ill are less likely to do violence.
Interesting.
In fact, it says 1 in 5 Americans will deal with a mental illness every year, but less than 5% of shootings are committed with someone with a mental illness.
And see, we're talking mental illness. I'm guessing that this is describing like depression and all kinds of different types of mental illness.
It counts.
Yeah.
It does count.
So I mean, yeah, that's amazing.
And like, come on, Republicans. Come on, people who buy this, that the Republicans are selling it. They've been talking about video games for almost 20 years, 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
It's never been proven. They blame the mentally ill just as much, and there's no data to prove it. 1 in 5 Americans every year, and yet less than 5%. That the data is just not there to back it up.
Yeah.
The other thing we can talk about with mental illness is just law of averages. Mental illness in America is going to be relatively the same in every country.
Right.
Like,
Sure,
you know,
that makes sense.
Yeah, because we're all people.
Distributed population. Sure.
Yet there's not another instance of the gun violence in any other country. So can we ding the bell for it's not mental illness?
I would think so.
Not mental illness.
Most likely, yeah, that's not the case. I think that there's certainly something to be said. I mean, of a lot of these, especially these last, mostly horrific. They're all horrific, but
Yeah.
they're all like racially motivated or
Not the Ohio one, it seems.
no. That one I know, but a lot of them are.
Absolutely.
Like the one at the mosque in New Zealand. That was a person that was claiming to represent some sort of Christian values. Like, my God, you're killing people, and thou shalt not kill. Must not have ever heard that one. But in the name of one religion trying to kill people of another, and it's just like the El Paso shooting. The guy was trying to, because it was a Latino invasion or Mexican invasion, whatever you want to call it. Like, really?
Yeah.
You can't let ICE do their job? And again, we're going to have at some point, I'm sure, a podcast on immigration, customs and immigration.
I'm probably one of the that's one thing I lean really far left on is immigration.
Sure. There's, maybe that will be the topic of our podcast is immigration overall. So we'll tackle that one.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I just feel like a lot of this stuff is mental illness is not driving it.
No.
It's a mental thought process of I represent this ideology and these other people are wrong and I've got to kill them to somehow be right.
So we're talking a lot about gun violence, gun regulation, mass shootings, and these are all different things.
Yep.
Now, the National Institute of Justice says there are 4 common traits in shooters and mass shootings. Do you know what a mass shooting is defined as?
Okay, I do not.
It's four people killed in one incident.
Okay, and that should be more than 4.
More than 4. That changed in 2012. It used to be 3 people. So, but they changed it so states could get some more help.
Okay.
Anyways, I don't know too much on why it was changed, but it is now considered 4 people.
Yep.
Sorry.
4 or
3
more.
people. Yeah.
Wait, you said it was 4, right?
Okay. You know what? I'll find it in the thing.
Okay.
And, but there were 4 common traits.
That's what we're getting hung up on.
Yes.
4 common
traits
Yep.
of shooters in mass shootings. And the first one was childhood trauma or exposure to violence.
Okay.
That was number 1 commonality. Number 2 was a crisis shortly before the shooting.
Okay.
Some tragic life event or something.
Yep.
Life's not worth it, got the bang, something like that. The other commonality, the third, was that they studied the actions of other shooters.
Oh yeah, talk about reading manifestos. I've heard of this before.
Yeah.
Looking for people to...
I was like worried researching everything for this.
I bet. Yeah, type it in. You know what? You probably are on some FBI or something list right now.
I am not nice to Trump on Twitter. I am a very no holds bar.
Sure. Well, the truth is the truth. But at the end of the day, I think that, it's interesting that they, I don't know, just that whole fact about having people with this background, crisis right before it's driving this. It's like, what are you going to do about that? Like, what do they call that? You're not getting to the root of the problem. You're just attacking the symptoms.
Yeah. And, and the 4th common trait from National Institute of Justice was they all had access to firearms.
Correct.
Either through their parents or their own.
Yep. Or just bought them or whatever and went across state lines.
Yeah.
That was something that happened recently. Wasn't it California?
So that's the problem with Chicago. Everyone loves to rag on Chicago, and I get it. That's fine, because Chicago is embarrassing.
Yeah, and it's almost like the media hides how bad it is in Chicago. It's like a war zone with all these people. They're shutting down trauma centers, denying patients because they can't take all the shooting victims.
And this is where I will ding the left and say,
both sides are wrong on this, by the way. We both agree on that.
Stop placating African Americans for the vote. That's in essence what you're doing.
They should be offended. The African American population should be offended that people are just pandering for their votes and not addressing the problems in their communities.
The core issues in their communities. Do you want to talk about race?
We can get into that a little bit. It's important.
We're gonna do the dance here. In January 2019, the Anti-Defamation League reported that right-wing extremists were linked to 50 extremist-related killings.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It was the highest since 1995.
Believe that. A lot of rhetoric and violent inducing rallies being hosted.
And yes, again, in case you're not noticing the shift, we're now attacking the left's talking point that it's, always white supremacist or white killing.
Correct.
At the thing.
Correct.
73% of all extremist killings can be linked to domestic right-wing terrorists.
Okay.
And only 23.4% can be linked to Islamic extremists.
Okay.
And this is of all extremist killings. 73% are linked to domestic right-wing.
Some sort of extreme value.
And again, this is extremist killings, which do make up a small fraction of the homicides and gun deaths in our country.
Yep.
Of the 114 mass shooters, of the 114 mass shootings since 1982, 110 of them were committed by men.
Yeah, isn't that just... My God.
64 were white men, 19 were black men, and 10 were Latinos.
Wow.
I mean, so when it comes to mass shootings, it does seem like it has a...
More white people are causing it.
More white people are causing mass shootings.
Yep.
And, 60% of American is white, and we make up 50% of the shootings.
Wow.
Which that honestly doesn't seem too far off the...
No, statistically.
Yeah, right?
It's probably in a range of
Wouldn't you want it to be 60% of Americans make up, 60% of white-only Americans make up 50% of shootings?
Representative.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So then I went to Wikipedia. I can't leave Wikipedia out altogether. And I went to their race and crime in the U.S. The U.S. Department in 2008 did a 28-year study, and it showed that African Americans accounted for 52% of all homicide offenders.
Wow.
45% were European Americans,
Yep.
and 2.2% were other.
Yep.
Now that means the offending rate was 8 times higher by African Americans. The victim rate is 6 times higher.
And so we're assuming by offenders that these are convictions.
Yeah,
Not arrests.
And we could definitely
go into that. I'm sure we will at some point.
Yes, absolutely. And like again, we're not going to do white privilege here. That's not the point of this show.
Not
but
this one.
like, I do have a harder time believing that you get away with murder regardless. I understand that there are...
We want to believe there's consequences for your actions.
Right. And I understand that there are studies that I will read and educate myself on to better understand the reason, rationale for those numbers. But we are presenting just the facts here.
Yep.
Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. In 2013, the percent of murderers was as so. 51%, and this is, in 2013, the percent of murder arrests.
Okay.
So these are just the
Just arrests.
Yes. African Americans made up 51% of the murder arrests.
Okay.
White Americans accounted for 33.5%.
Okay.
And Hispanic made 12.8% of the murder arrests. One interesting thing, we tend to kill people of the same race.
Oh, right. People talk about the black on black crime, white on white crime is just as bad, and brown on brown, and whatever other purple on purple.
Tends to be accurate. 84% of Euro Americans. I'm using whatever the sites listed for either black, African Americans.
Whatever you want to call the different races.
I'm just going off the things. So I'm not preferencing. I would tend to go with African Americans.
Sure.
I don't even know. I've been called out for that. I guess it's supposed to be people of color now. I don't know. I don't mean any offense.
Yeah. I think as long as your intent's there, it's fine.
We'll talk about that.
Right. Good. Oh my gosh.
So 84% of European Americans are killed by European Americans. 93% of African Americans are killed by African Americans.
Yep.
We like to kill each other. We look the same, I guess. Now, African Americans account for the majority of gun homicides, while white people account for the vast majority of non-gun homicides. And again, going back, we can use the numbers we've already learned to know that most of the homicides are done with handguns.
Yep.
64% was the number. So, why do we spend so much time talking about
the assault rifles? Yeah. You know, it gets back to the point about the background checks. You know, I sort of love and hate that term, common sense gun laws, but there are, I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it, some common sense things like the universal background checks that have to be there, right? And you can squabble about the criteria as much as you want, but I think the statistics speak for themselves into what we should be looking for and making sure that, at least for whatever waiting period we define, you have to be screened to ensure that at least you don't hit one of these red flags. Like, I think that's fine to call it that.
Again, my question.
But there's other things to address too.
Yeah, like again, what are you going to do if you get depressed?
Correct. I think that, you know,
or experience a trauma. I mean,
I'm talking about the initial. We talked about this thing too. Like, we're building a wall here, right? And I hate that word too, right? I'm not building a wall across the border, by the way. I'm building a figurative wall that is. It's sort of like building on the foundation of gun regulations that we have now, and saying, look, we need better background checks. That's not going to solve everything, but we need that. And then you're also talking about something else, right? There is mental health is in and of itself something that needs to be addressed. So I think that
that's Trump's big go-to.
Correct.
Right now.
I'm disagreeing with that. I think you should not go there, but I think that it needs to be addressed on itself, and that's just another block that helps to impact the issue that could potentially be there if you do have a crisis, right? You need outlets and ways to deal with this stuff. That's not violence.
One of the points that I heard about Chicago, I started this earlier, but I just believe it to be true too, is just because Chicago has very strict gun laws doesn't mean the neighboring communities do.
Sure.
So if I can go to Indiana and buy guns, 10 guns, snuggle them into Chicago and sell them for $2,000 a piece, $100,000 on the street.
The criminals are not going to follow the laws anyway. It doesn't matter. We have to find a way to work on the issues within the communities.
That's why I think it's so unfair to use Chicago as, their
it's
gun...
Not a scapegoat.
It's not a scapegoat. It's not an island.
Yep.
If you want to use an island, go to Australia, use the numbers. It's an island. And guess what? They're pro taking guns or having more gun regulations.
And things that are making sure that people follow the right safety training.
Yes,
that's another one. We should all have to go through some level of safety training.
Trump came out strong at first, saying he supported background checks. Since then, he's completely backed off under the pressure of the NRA, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
and
that's a shame. There are things that Trump's getting right. We're going to have a podcast on that.
Well, here, I can list...
That's one of them he got right.
2 right here, but then I'm going to counter them on why they're not good. In his budget, he has $8.6 billion to expand and transform VA's focus on mental health.
Okay.
Awesome.
That's great.
Great news. He also increased the funding for community non-hospital treatment and mental health services.
Okay.
That's the big one I want to focus on. Okay. So, community non-hospital treatment. Okay. The problem is he wants to repeal Medicaid expansions.
Okay, I remember that. Part of the Obamacare fight.
40% of adults covered through the expansions are people with behavioral health conditions.
I've heard of this too.
So he wants to have better
it's like
mental
trying to
health.
Have it from both sides.
But he wants to take all the coverage away.
Yeah.
There's this guy.
It's kind of like how we were all going to be taken care of with this healthcare plan, right?
You want to take a whack at that name? Paul Gianfrido?
Yeah, good enough.
Okay. He is the president and CEO of the advocacy group Mental Health America.
Okay.
He said the proposed changes and cuts to Medicaid would devastate the critical source of coverage for mental health and addiction care.
Yeah.
He went on to say the budget is more of a retreat from the pledge than an advance on it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. We've been talking about a lot of these budget proposals from the current administration have really been, the exact opposite of what was campaigned for on the trail, right? When he was trying to become president, he was saying about how he was going to be there for the people, represent the people, all the people, right? Regardless of who voted for him. And he was supposed to make sure that we got great health care, tremendous, all these crazy words he uses all the time that are great for describing what he wants to do, but then nothing ever comes of that side of it. It's just absolutely pathetic.
1 in 5 gun owners are in the NRA.
I was an NRA member at one point. I stopped once that Wayne LaPierre guy started going nuts in his conventions and things. So you're listening to a former NRA member here too, by the way.
And since 2000, the NRA has increased their spending on lobbying 400%.
That's what's wrong with the NRA.
$5 million.
Why they should not be supported anymore, because they're not representing gun owners' rights. All they publish is saying the Democrats want to do nothing but take your guns.
And it's easy.
No one in the Democrat side is really saying that we're going to just take all your guns. They're saying,
Joe Biden did.
Well, then that was a mistake on his part.
He did that just recently. He goes, yep, I'm coming for him.
Well, then, fuck you, Joe. You're not going to take my guns.
I know, and
that's just it. That's the problem, is you can't just say you're going to just go one way or the other. There has to be a middle ground that is sensible. Right. That's what's going to win.
Right. And, I mean, I don't know how... I hate the lobbying system.
Yeah.
I hate...
Well, that's the problem. The way that it works with the government, how they push agendas at the corporate level and the rich people.
When Trump was first there, he was saying we should look into background checks, and somebody said something about the gun lobby, and he goes, oh, I know they have great power. They have great power over you. Now look where Trump is.
Got power over you, buddy.
I know. It's a sad thing. Yeah. So we are both in favor of mandatory weight.
Yep.
We're both in favor of training.
Yep.
Mandatory training.
Safety training.
Are you on board for the gun registry?
I think gun registry is nothing wrong with that. I think that you should also close all of the loopholes that allow for gun purchases that are not through a licensed dealer. I don't see any reason why you should be able to skirt that. It's like transferring a car. You got to go to the DMV to transfer the title.
Yeah.
Same thing with a gun.
Um,
And I think that makes sense. Those are the major things that I think are part of the common sense. Regulation needs to be out there. That's the next step. We got to build on the foundation we got now.
all the facts and the statistics I provided will be shared. The links that I got them from will be shared.
Yep.
I've made sure all my data was up to date from reputable sources. If you guys think we missed anything,
Let us know.
and we'll try to cover it. But this has been our second show of Brent and Chris Talk, and I hope you enjoyed our take on gun regulation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening.
Tune in next week, and we'll have another show, and we'll figure out what it's going to be about before then.
Hopefully.
No promises. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day. Nice week.